Welcome to the J&J Show. I'm Jeff, he's Jerry, and today we are here to talk about or continue our conversation on the end of days and the imminent return of Jesus. This is a topic we covered way back in episode 8. We did a 3-part series, but there's just so much that's been happening lately and just so much that's happened in that short of time that we just felt like we needed to revisit this topic because if there's nothing else we want to do on this channel is we want to prepare people, we want to warn people, and we want to I don't want to say try to instill that sense of urgency in people, but we need to be out there trying to help people, trying to reach the lost, trying to let people know that these things that have been predicted by the Bible are starting to happen, and they're starting to happen with more frequency than they were before. I know, like in every decade, everybody's felt like, oh, this it's really bad now, and things are starting to happen. But Jerry, I mean, it's I know we've talked about that on this channel before too, but it's this is just like unlike anything we've ever seen, isn't it?
It definitely is. You do get folks. I think a lot of them are kind of like we've said before. Even non-Christians are starting to see what's going on. But I do run into Christians who I think deep down they see it, but they're unnerved by it, and so they tend to throw out what you were saying about, well, in the '80s everybody thought that that was the end times, and in the '70s they all thought that it was the end times, and then in the '90s everybody thought, well, I don't know about what it was like in the '70s because I was just a kid. I can tell you in the '80s it was not anywhere near like it is now. There was some talk of it. There was some guy who was claiming he knew when the rapture was that caused a big stir. But I can tell you for sure in the '90s that I had already studied end times prophecy quite a bit by then. I'd already had 5 or 6 years, which is not a lot, but it's enough to try to, if you study something for 5 or 6 years, you get kind of a feel of the nature of it. And I did not feel in the '90s like the end times were close at all. I don't think, and throughout the first decade of the 2000s, even with 9/11, with all that, you kind of felt at times with 9/11 like it had hints of what it might be like. But even then, you were like, nah, this isn't really what's mentioned in the end times prophecy. It just felt like a big event, like Pearl Harbor would have been, or something like that. It really wasn't until about 2013, for some reason, that I began to think about the end times approaching. And even then, I remember having discussions with Jonathan about it, and us, kind of feeling like it was still 20, 30 years off. And then 2015 came, and everything seemed to kind of change. That summer of 2015 there was just a shift in the atmosphere. People who were alive in the 60s say they could feel it. And when 1966 rolled around, that there was just a change, there's a famous book about one of the first battles in Vietnam called We Were Soldiers Once and Young. And in that book, early on in the book, he points out that at the end of 1965, there was a change, and they could all feel it. They just couldn't describe it. And the same thing happened in 2015. And since 2015, it has not stopped getting crazier and crazier.
And I don't know about you or anybody else, but it seems like I mean, the Bible can be taken in so many different ways and what it says in so many different ways, but you kind of think of it, at least I did. I'm not sure if anybody else did, as a gradual descent. But this has been very rapid. It's like just one thing right after another, and it hasn't been gradual at all. It hasn't been kind of like tipping point leading down very gradually to that point. It just seems like it's happening, and it's happening quick, and we need to be ready for it.
Yeah, there have been, obviously, I don't think anybody would doubt that the pandemic was a big factor in all of this, that events have accelerated since then. And I tell you, I really believe that this war in Ukraine has also been a big factor, not so much because of the war itself, but because of the effects that it's had around the world, I think we're going to see the effects in food production, the effects in military spending and buildup, the alliances and how they have shifted. And it's the like throwing a pebble into the pond. The pebble may not be that big, but the ripples go out. And we've had a lot of wars in our past, and not every war is reason to think that there's something amiss in the atmosphere. And I really didn't think that this conflict was going to be, I didn't think it was going to have too much influence outside of that region when it first started, but it clearly has. It's had a lot of, and it continues to have a great impact on world events and the course of events, and especially with some of these alliances that are forming, we might get to tonight. And you bring up a really good point, and it's one thing I've heard people mention a lot of the watchers, the watchmen who pay attention to Bible prophecy. And people will say, well, why does anybody think that now is any different than the 1990s? And because the fact of the matter is, when you list out the things that we're told to look for the end times, and make no mistake, the Lord does make perfectly clear that Christians who are paying attention, who are watching, will know the season. It's this idea that everybody's going to be caught blindsided by it is not biblical at all. Now, it is true that we don't know the day or the hour, but he makes very clear that we will know the season. And really the best way to put it right now, the reason why this is different is because of the convergence. And I think we've probably mentioned that in our previous episodes. But Jeff, since we did our last episode about this, there has been so much more that has occurred. It's mind-boggling, all the different things that have happened. And really what makes right now different is the convergence of everything happening at the same time. We've had famines before, and we've had wars before. There's been pandemics in the world before. We have had wars in the Middle East before. But now you're having everything happening at the same time. And it's not just because the internet's been around for a while now, since the 90s. It's not just communication. It's not just 24-hour news cycles. There has been a definite shift. And what we're seeing is, people can ignore it if they want to. That's their prerogative to ignore it, but they do so at their own peril, because, like you said, the time is short. There is very much a sense of urgency, because I personally believe at this point in time that I don't know how much time we have. I really don't. I've said before on this channel that I thought we were down to less than 3 years, and I definitely feel that the case now. I actually feel, and I'm the type that I've always, since 2015, I've always kind of felt like, well, it's next year. But now for the first time, I don't know when it is. I really don't. Nobody does. But it does feel like everything's in place right now. And like I said, here in a minute, we'll list out all the stuff that's been going on. But the convergence, everything coming in at once. I remember, I'll finish with this, let you get a word. I remember hearing a guy who studies this stuff. He has like a TV channel where he studies it and whatnot. He said back in the 80s and 90s, they had to scratch around to find one or two things that were occurring worldwide that related to prophecy. He said now every single day you have to skip stuff because there's so much going on. There's guys that I watch that every day they do a podcast on this, and every day they have something new to throw in there. It's unreal how they're able to do it, but it's because stuff is constantly going on. You can't keep up with all of it. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like it. And it's every single day there's something. It might be 1 or 2 days where there's nothing, but usually there's something. What was yesterday? Yesterday we had a number one most popular news talk commentator on television lose his job. Now, if anybody thinks that was just a nothing burger, then they're not paying attention. That was very important. It had far more to do than with just politics. And we can get into that too later if we want to.
All right, there we go. Got my light on. I feel like I'm not sitting in the dark now. But no, like you said, I mean, who has the number one show at that time slot, and then just all of a sudden decides to get rid of their host. You know, like you said. And there's other things too that have been ramping up lately, like the rapture dreams. We've talked about that. We've touched on people having visions of heaven and hell in their dreams. Even I would go so far as to say the cryptid sightings that we've talked about on this channel have really ramped up since when about 2015, 2016. More and more people are coming forward saying, and you can say yes because of the internet, like you just said, 24-hour news cycle of the internet. It gives an outlet for people to post their stories online. But the amount of stories that are posted every single day in these forums is just, it's crazy. And people coming forward now, it just, you heard about, like we've talked about before, Bigfoot only being in the Pacific Northwest, now
Right.
everywhere. And it's just things like that have really started to ramp up too. Small things that you probably just kind of brush off as, people just, oh, it's just a dream with the rapture dreams, or your vision was just a dream, or these things, you didn't really see a Bigfoot, you saw something else out there. It's just little things like that, or just like you just mentioned with that certain newscaster losing his job.
Yeah.
People will brush that off and just say, "No, you're trying to make something out of nothing." But all these things that are happening, and then, like you said, we'll get to the big things here in a minute. It's just it's too much all at the same time to be a coincidence. Which we've said on this channel, we don't believe in coincidence. I know I don't. I know you don't. So it's just too much of a coincidence. Exactly. Yeah. It'd be nice to brush some of this off as coincidence, but it's just too much altogether, all at the same time, to be a coincidence.
It really is. It's you get to a point where you have to make a decision. Am I going to do the ostrich thing and simply refuse to see any of this stuff, or am I going to acknowledge it and be awake? Because, like I said before, if you look at Revelations and the first few chapters that we always recommend people read, there is some of the churches in there are admonished because they're not awake. They're sleeping, basically. They're lukewarm. They're not paying attention. They're worried about the things of the world. And we do see that as well. We see folks, Christians and non-Christians, who are much more concerned with what's going on here on planet Earth than they are looking for the Lord's appearing. And everybody has to kind of decide what their source of truth is going to be. And clearly for Bible believing Christians, it's the Bible, it's the Word of God. I don't make any apologies. I'm not going to apologize for that. I stand by that and freely admit it. Other people, it tends to fall into, they put their faith into one of three things. It's either the news media, which is a popular one, the scientific community, or Hollywood. And those are the big three that people tend to say, okay, I'm going to believe what is coming. And sometimes it's a combination of all three, because they do tend to line up a lot. But they're going to choose to believe about this world and this existence what science says, or what Hollywood says, or the worst of all, what the news media says. And that's their right. They're free to do that if they want to. I reject all three of those. Now, of course, there is good science out there. I'm certainly not, God made what science is. That's, we have good medicine, and we have all sorts of stuff that we've learned through science. I'm not anti-science. I am anti-evolution. And, but people forget that's a theory. It's not proven. It's been put out there as fact, but it's not fact. It's theory. And everyone's welcome to their own theories. So in this day and age, what I'm getting to is that everyone has to kind of decide if they want to, blow it off and say there's nothing here, then that's fine. The way I see it, we are very much in the same time period that Noah was before the flood. And even Jesus even says, as it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be at the coming of the Son of Man. And now I think there's multiple meanings to that. That he was referring to. And with a lot of this prophecy, there are symbolic meanings to a lot of these prophecies, and there's literal. And like you said, the reason why a lot of people stay away from the prophecy, and I understand that to some extent, because there are a lot of different interpretations. And when it comes to salvation, salvation's cut and dry, and it's through Christ alone, by faith alone. It's not through works. I mean, we can all agree on that. But the Bible is intentionally gray and unclear in Bible prophecy, because the purpose of prophecy isn't to tell us what's going to happen. The purpose of prophecy is to give God the glory after it does happen. And so there are things in there that we can agree to disagree on, and that's perfectly fine. It's not a matter of salvation or being evil or anything like that. It's just a matter of, okay, this is how I'm seeing this, and this is how I'm not. But with that being said, these things that we're talking about that are occurring, the Bible makes clear that we should see these things coming. As they're coming about, we should begin to understand, okay, this is what the Bible describes. Whether we see the same thing with the Revelation 12 sign or whatnot, whether we agree, doesn't matter. That the circumstances that the Bible talks about as occurring on earth before his appearing, those things we're seeing right now.
Well, on that note that people align with science and the mainstream media and Hollywood, I just, the little things, you see, like I just mentioned with rapture dreams and visions and the cryptids. I saw an article where this actress, I don't know if I want to say her name or not, but I've heard talk before about her like communicating with spirits, but she is making a documentary about her satanic witchcraft, and she calls it satanic witchcraft. And she is making a documentary about her spiritual journey to Salem, Massachusetts, to try to commune with spirits and to look into witchcraft and ghost hunting and stuff like that. And they're actively, like, they say it in the interviews, that they're actively trying to recruit people to satanic witchcraft, and they're trying to build it up as some spiritual journey and some uplifting, empowering thing, and just something that's good for your health. Healthy. Another word they use is healthy. And it's Satan basically just recruiting through this person, through both of the people in the film, through the executive producers who are out there parading this around, and they're praising it. And it's just another, to me, it was just, when we talked about revisiting this topic, I saw that headline the next day. And I just, if that's not another sign of the times, I don't know what is. There's people out there actively trying to recruit people under the guise of, oh, this is an empowering, I can't say that word right now, empowering movement where, it's healthy for you, and it'll help you center yourself, and you'll find peace with this. And I'm just sitting there with this exact look on my face, like, what are you talking about? And they specifically say satanic witchcraft because, there's witchcraft out there that people are witches and they practice witchcraft. But what they really mean is that they're trying to be naturalist and commune with the earth and stuff. But this, which, that stems off from the occult witchcraft. So I don't see any difference in that. I'm not trying to defend that or say it's any different. Sure. All witchcraft stems from the occult. If you look up witchcraft, it is linked with the occult. And they specifically call this satanic witchcraft. And they even say, we recognize there's a stigma that goes along with this, but we're going to go out here and push it anyway. And they say they're specifically trying to influence women and to use their voice and to be empowered. And I just, the enemy is out there blatantly in our faces, just actively recruiting and actively pushing their agenda blatantly right out in the open in our face. They're not even trying to hide it. And I think, that's another sign, because, the devil is all about manipulation and being sneaky and tricking people. But this is just blatant right out there in the front. So, maybe he sees what's happening. Maybe he sees what's going on. He's like, wow, I need to ramp up my efforts to try to, lead as many people astray as I can before this goes down, before Jesus comes back. And that's all this is. And I just don't see how anybody could look at this. Well, I could actually. They're uninformed. They're lost. They have nothing to believe in, and they're looking for something to believe in. They have a God-sized hole in their heart that they try to fill with other things, like this actress has. And they're gullible, to be honest, and they want to believe in something. They want something to lead them and to guide them, and instead of turning to God and to the Bible and to Jesus, they find themselves being actively recruited by the enemy, and it's just it saddens me, and it's just I you know that's that's why we need to be out there. That's why we need to be spreading the word, and that's why when I saw that, I was glad we were revisiting this topic, because the time's now to get right with the Lord, and the time is now to spread the gospel and to save as many people as we can, because the enemy's out there trying to lead as many as they can astray, and they're doing it right out blatantly in the open in our faces, and they don't care. They openly admit that it's satanic witchcraft, that there's a stigma, and they don't care. So why should we be reserved in our efforts to go out and to spread the gospel? Somebody might say something bad about you. Somebody might try to smear you or your character, but who cares? You're out there trying to save people. So I'm really glad we decided to come back to this topic, because that's one of the main things I wanted to push out there, is that time is now to save as many as we can before it's too late, and time's running short.
The door is going to slam. There's no doubt the door is going to slam, and it's going to slam pretty soon. You can see that there's not bringing up the Satanism thing. It's one of the big signs, because it's out there. Just look at the not the Oscars. Look at the Grammys, the Oscars too, for that matter. Look at the Super Bowl halftime shows. They can't have an Oscar performance now or a halftime show without Satanism in it, the occult. People, I didn't see it. People who don't see it don't know what they're looking at. It's there. It's blatant. Just because you're ignorant of something doesn't mean it's not there. But see, that's part of the deception, is that these people, think about it this way. The study just came out recently. I'm not sure how accurate it is, but for the most part, Christians, it's a minority of Christians now that believe that Jesus lived a sin-free life. Most Christians now are Bible illiterate. Even those who identify as born again, they have a very poor knowledge of the Bible. So if they don't know what their faith is, then how can we expect non-Christians to be able to spot the occult and the deceptions that come their way? The only reason I know this stuff is because I researched it back when I was younger, because I didn't want to get involved in it. And I had an issue where I liked rock music, but I didn't want to listen to overtly satanic rock music. I don't really listen to much rock anymore, but back in the day, I went out of my way to avoid any groups that I felt were really pushing that stuff. So the advent of Satanism out in the open, and it's not just those you see there's TV shows now where Satan is cast as in a sympathetic light. There is, right here in Hampton Roads, we have a after school program that's Satan related. It's basically right there in the name, after hours Satan care, basically, I guess is what they call it. It is the most popular topic right now is Satanism. It's growing rapidly. People are smitten with this whole idea of the devil and Satanism. Some of this, to some extent, can be blamed on the church and how the church has failed to ever show any power. The church has denied the power that Jesus gave us. They've been content to grow cold and now a lot of Christians don't even recognize the powers that we have. If somebody goes to cast out demons or whatnot, then the Christians, they're just as shaken up as the lost. Well, much of what Jesus did was casting out demons. He said, these signs will follow those who are in my name, that they'll do these things. So the church has really created this vacuum that is currently allowing the occult and Satanism to storm in and fill it, because the church is basically vacated. Not all the church, of course, but a lot of it. But what has happened, basically, there's been a separating and this falling away, which the Bible talks about in the church. And we have seen that. We are in the midst of that now. Timothy talks about it. Jesus refers to it. The falling away has occurred. The Christian churches, look at what's going on right now. There's a big push to force all the church, and a bunch of churches are going that direction, to embrace the rainbow agenda. And a lot of churches, especially a lot of the big churches, they have gone completely that direction. The Charles Stanley, who just passed away, I guess last week, his son is a huge champion of the rainbow agenda. And so churches are falling one after another. There's a video out there now with all these pastors on there apologizing to the gay community for ever preaching against it. And they're all saying about how sorry they are and asking for forgiveness for basically preaching what the Bible says. And so there's a huge exodus right now away from the Bible. And the people are getting on that broad road that Jesus talked about, and they're heading down full speed. And more power to them if that's what they want. I refuse to do that. I don't care what anybody says. People can laugh, people can scoff, but I'm more than happy to stay on the narrow road. Doesn't mean I dislike these people or hate them. I certainly don't. I feel bad for a lot of them. There's still a lot of them that are, in spite of everything that's going on now, people who are getting saved, and they're turning and repenting. They're realizing that there is no sin that's too great for the Lord to forgive them of. And we still have some amazing people that are turning to the Lord and entering the kingdom of heaven. So it's not too late. But like you said, now is, I heard a guy say just today, if you're sitting on the fence, you have to realize the devil owns the fence. So that's not a good place to be.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying about the rainbow agenda and everything, it's not that we hate those kinds of people. It's not that we hate them. God tells us to love everybody. So you can still love these people and love them for who they are, but he also tells us to hate the sin. So it's not that we hate them. We just hate the sin, which is what the Bible teaches us, which is what God teaches us. But for the church to blatantly go out there and do that, that's to me, I mean, it's just the Satan has infected the church. He's infected these people, and it's everywhere now. It's out in Hollywood, TV shows, movies, everything. If you look closely enough, has the influence of the devil in it. And
Sure.
Well, not everything. I know there are movies out there that are Christian based, and they do portray it in a good light. But most everything else, it's everywhere if you look for it. And once you start noticing it, it's hard to not notice it. Like you said, with music and stuff, I like rock music myself, but there's just certain things and certain songs with certain bands that I'm just like, I never used to catch on before. And now it's like, what am I listening to? Why am I listening to this? I turn it off. I find myself listening to it less and less.
Me too.
And it's not just rock music either, but all kinds of music. It's there. And, once you start to notice it, once God flips that switch in you to start seeing things, it's like you said, we have the power within us. And once he illuminates that within us, you start to notice all this stuff. And that's one thing that goes along with noticing the signs of the times and noticing how little things are happening. And it's like, all these like one-off stories, like the actress and her pilgrimage to Salem and her satanic witchcraft. People might look at that and scoff at it and think, that's disgusting. What is this world coming to? But seriously, what is this world coming to? It's just one small step in a bigger picture with all of these things happening that is leading to the return of Jesus. It's everything that the Bible has said. And I know you mentioned some of the bigger stuff that's been happening lately. Did you want to get into that now, or?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. One thing before I launch into that is, if anybody has ever, one thing I think that helps out a little bit, and this is not because I'm any better than anybody else, it's just something that I've been through. If you've ever been in a situation in your walk with the Lord where the Lord has said something that was going to happen, and then you had to wait for it, and it took a long time, and then it happened. If you've ever been through that, then it makes it easier to see now that, yes, this will eventually happen. Because if you've been in a situation where it seemed like the Lord wasn't going to come through and time was dragging on and on and on, and then he did, you realize that, okay, that's where we are now. He's told us to wait. He's told us he's coming. Now it's just on us to not doubt. And it may seem like it on certain days. It may seem like, well, this is, everybody has always thought that they were, well, everybody hasn't always thought that they were in the end times. That's not true. It has been in the past. There has been times when people have felt that way, but it hasn't been everybody by any stretch. I just want to start off and addressing, we're not going to go in too much detail, but just as a general, people say, we talk about convergence, and what do you mean by everything converging? I think one of the biggest things to really remember when it comes to the end times and what is it that's gives us an idea that the end times could be here. Obviously, one of them is the rebirth of the nation of Israel. Before Israel became a nation again, it was not possible for the end times to play out like they're described as playing out in the book of Daniel and in Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, and especially in Revelations. But one of the things, and this is a real quick verse, because I know people don't like to typically listen to reading, but it's one single verse. And it's, for me personally, it's what sets the table. It points to the fact that, yeah, we are there, because this is cut and dry. And it's Jesus speaking in Matthew chapter 24, verse 14. That's Matthew 24:14. And he says, "This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come." And ladies and gentlemen, the gospel has been preached in all the nations. That is done. With the internet, there is no country that you can go to and not have access in some way, shape, or form to the gospel. Even in North Korea and whatnot, the gospel has gone into that country. There is nowhere where people have never heard. It doesn't say that every single person has to hear. It says it goes into all the nations. Somebody might say, well, there's some tribes in Brazil that in the Amazon basin that we haven't got to. Well, Brazil has received the gospel. They have a giant mountain with a giant Jesus statue on top of it. It's safe to say that Brazil has indeed received the gospel. There isn't a single country. Outer Mongolia has received the gospel. I know, because our church has sent Christmas packages there for the kids and whatnot. And so it's certainly Russia has. China has a ton of Christians. Vietnam has. There's a lot of Catholics that used to live in Vietnam. Same with Japan. You just can't find a nation that has not received the gospel yet. So that has been fulfilled. And it doesn't say here that once all the nations have received the gospel, that at any point after that, the end might come. It says, and then the end will come. So he says, as soon as the nations have all heard, the end will come. Now, you take that verse and you look at that in light of what we're seeing. See, that's where you have to connect these things. You don't look at one single thing, the unbelievable number of horrible earthquakes that are going on worldwide daily. I think today it was in the Pacific realm, not Sumatra, but somewhere down there. They had a huge one. The people all had to flee to high ground for hours because of the tsunami warning, because it was like a 7.0 earthquake. Every day it's somewhere. It's not just the earthquakes. It's not just the fact that you have elites that control the flow of information. It's not just the fact that Israel now is in the worst position that it has been in since it was reborn. It won't be very long. And the actors that you have lining up in an alliance against Israel right now are the very ones that are described in Bible prophecy, namely being Syria, Iran, Russia, and to a lesser extent, Turkey. And so they've made quite clear since we did our last video that they see Israel now as isolated, that the United States has made it very plain that we're not going to come to their aid. And so they have let it be known that they're going to try and take Israel out. And that should, probably by the next time that we do one of these videos, there'll probably be more. It looked like they were going to come to blows during Ramadan. Is it possible that nothing happens? It's possible. It's always possible in the Middle East that it blows over. It has so many times. But this looks different because Israel itself is in tremendous turmoil right now. People, if they're paying attention, Israel is on the verge of a civil war. The riots and whatnot every night because of the political divisions that are in the country. And that's further emboldening their enemies. So Israel is a barometer for end times prophecy. And right now, Israel is on the brink. Their leaders are saying that they're closer to an all-out war than they are to peace at the current time. And if there's an all-out war, you have a lot of powerful bad actors aligned against Israel at this point. So you have that, like you said, with the occult and the Satanism that's wide open at this point. Like we said before, the church is those that are in Christ seem to be getting stronger, but overall there's definitely a dividing that's occurring. Those who are Christians seem to be catching fire and doing more. There does seem to be something of a revival that's going on. However, those that have, those who don't have are losing what they once had, and those who have had are getting even more, like Jesus said. So, like you mentioned with the cryptids, I would say especially the UFO issues. I don't really follow UFO. I never really have followed UFO stuff very much, but when your government is talking about it fairly regularly, then you tend to take notice. A subject like we've mentioned on here before, a subject that used to be the domain of quote unquote crackpots and conspiracy theorists, and now the government is talking about motherships and whatnot, sending out probes, like some sort of a star destroyer up there, sending out probe droids to recon Hoth. It's like what? And they've been watching Empire Strikes Back. So it's there's a lot of sightings, and you can't help but wonder. It's gotten people kind of shaken up about where are all these. I've noticed. I guess it was it Alaska? There was a huge spiral in the sky that was just seen. I guess it was last week, and looked very much like the Norway spiral that we've shown on this channel before. But this was just last week. Looked very similar. Pretty sure it was over Alaska. And of course, immediately, like we've said before, as soon as they saw it, they rushed out and said, "Oh, that's just jet fuel coming into the atmosphere," which I thought was funny because the Norway spiral, they said it was a Russian rocket that was coming back in. So I guess rockets and the fuel that comes out of them makes the same spiral. And why was it that the ancients were seeing these spirals? How many rockets were flying around back then when they were putting them on cave walls? But that was just this week. And so, like I said, there was a rush to try to dismiss it. There's always a rush to dismiss all this stuff. Oh, there's nothing to see here. That was, that was just swamp gas or whatever what have you. It never fails. And, there's even more. Once we finish this up, I'll be laying in bed tonight and think, oh, I didn't even mention this, or I didn't mention that. Well, I mean, there's probably some that you've thought of that I've skipped.
No, you pretty much touched on everything I have. I mean, maybe in ancient times the Star Destroyers were still sending out those probe drones, and they were causing those spirals in the sky, and that's what they drew on the cave walls. But yeah, no, I didn't even think about the UFO thing and how much they're talking about. Like, they're openly talking about it now. Even 10, 15 years ago, people were still being ridiculed for believing in UFOs and seeing them, and now our government is just releasing footage. They're releasing documents. They're openly talking about it, and that's, if that doesn't point to everything culminating and coming together along with everything else we've talked about, I don't know what does. But I fully agree with what you said excuse me, about Israel being the barometer and being the central focus. If this is something that you're taking an interest in, you should definitely keep an eye on Israel, because that's what it all revolves around. That's what it's always revolved around. That's God's land. That's the promised land. That's his chosen land that it's always revolved around. And of course, with satanic rituals and witchcraft and stuff like that heating up, and him affecting more and more people, and these countries, that this is the work of the enemy that they're carrying out over there against Israel. They're all teaming up and ganging up on him. Is like you said, like we've said, not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that Israel is being bullied, that God's promised land is under attack, and openly under attack, and on the brink of war. So that is just that's what we all need to keep an eye on, especially if you're interested in this topic. Is there are the small things that are interesting, like the cryptids and the UFOs and the rapture dreams, which everybody always tries to dismiss as this or that. Like you said, everybody's so quick to dismiss everything, but you have to remember, this is the devil's domain. that we live in, the earth, the world, is the
That's right.
devil's. And of course, everybody's going to be ridiculed for saying they had a rapture dream, and everybody's going to come out and try to dismiss it. And, you know, just what's going on in the Middle East is it's it's happening. Whether you want to believe, whether if you, like you said earlier, some people want to ostrich it and they want to bury their head in the sand and just kind of ignore it. I think a lot of people do that out of fear. Like they're not, they have earthly things that they cling to, and that they don't want this world to end yet, and they're not ready. I know we've
Sure.
talked about that before too, people not being ready.
Sure.
And you can try to ignore it all you want to, but it's in the Bible, it's in Revelation. Jesus talked about it. He said it would happen. And so it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And when things start to, the signs start to appear, it's getting harder to ignore it. But you can try if you want to, but it's happening.
Yeah, it's happening and people know it deep down. Look, the age that we're in right now is the church age. This is the age of grace. This is the age where you are free basically to choose the Lord or not. And people say, well, how do you know that this is the church age and the age of grace? What is it I just read? This gospel shall be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come. And when that occurs, the age of grace ends. And then the Lord resumes dealing with Israel. Israel's been put on the back burner in order for the gospel to go out. Israel was passed over as taking the gospel to the nations. Jews were very instrumental, obviously, writing the Bible, the early church filled with Jews. But for the most part, the gospel went out from the Gentiles. And Israel has been on the back burner, but the Lord has never intended that to be permanent. Paul talks about a temporary setting aside, that they'll be brought back. And that's what the end times is for. It's not just the wrath of the Lord. It's the Lord dealing with the Jewish people and them coming back. Not all of them, unfortunately, but the remnant of them coming back and realizing that he is, in fact, their savior. That's the purpose of the end times. And so we are coming to Jesus talks about the end of the age. And that's what this is. This is the culmination of the age of grace. And, one of the things that it says in the Bible, people don't really like to talk about it. It says that in the last days, people will follow after their own lust and their own ungodliness. It says, because of them, the way of righteousness will be harmed or ridiculed. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. That's what we were just talking about. Because of people who have followed after their own lust, the Bible-believing church now is being discredited and harassed and judged because it refuses to go along and approve of folks who have followed after their own desires. It's exactly what the Bible says is going to happen. It's exactly what we're seeing right now. All this stuff could not be more clear. It's sometimes it's exasperating, and like we said here before, I totally get that non-Christians may not see this or be aware of it. I don't expect them to be up on, but for the Christians to not see this, it has really been an eye opener. But like I always like to say, I know for a fact that people are still getting saved. And, every time I hear somebody leave a comment or whatnot, where they say, I've only been saved since last year and I'm just eager to read the Bible. I mean, it's just a great thing. It makes worth waiting. It's like, what? I'm glad the Lord didn't come last year, because then that person wouldn't have made it. But there is going to come a time, just like with Noah, there was a day when the Noah entered the ark and the Lord sealed that door shut. And when that happened, that was it. The same thing is going to happen, and it's coming soon. There's going to be a day when this stuff all goes down and the door is going to slam shut. And after that, it's going to be too late. And what's going to occur on this earth after that, people cannot imagine. It's going to be beyond description as to how bad, because one of the things more than anything else that people don't appreciate is what happens when all hope is sucked out of the earth. Even though the earth is bad, the earth still has a restrainer now. The Holy Spirit restrains evil, and there's still hope and light in the world through the gospel. But once the church is gone, this world is going to be a dark, dark place without hope. And I think people are bad now. It's going to get even worse. And it's people are like, well, I'll get saved then and what. Well, if you can't get saved now when it's easy, how do people think they're going to get saved during the rapture when it's going to cost them their lives? Because it will. And that's another thing we didn't mention. There's so many different things. Look at this currency. They're looking at going away from regular cash currency and going to automated currency. Basically, it's going to be a system whereby everybody's plugged in to the computer system, and it's a one world currency. And that's how we're going to do because the collapsing of the banks. And so the system, back in the 80s, we weren't set up at all to have a one world currency or to have a system where that could all be controlled. Now, not only is it set up and the technology there, but the administrations of the world, including our own, is pushing heavily to go to that as fast as possible. And once that's done, if you're doing things like not doing what the government likes, whatever that may be, they can just cut you off from your money because they're going to have the ability to do it. And so it's far scarier than people realize. But the Lord, he's aware. It's like I've heard people say, and it's true. The Lord's not shaken up by all that. He knows what's going on. But you can see the Antichrist system is set up. It's ready to be there. People are eager to unveil it, the technology. They even have now, they're talking about where you don't even have to get a chip in order to do the banking. Like they're talking about having a chip in your hand that you could get where you wouldn't have to have a card. You don't even have to get a chip now. They have tattoos that'll be able to do it. And so it's the technology is just going back like gangbusters. Look at AI. I don't know how AI rolls into Bible prophecy, but one thing I do know, the people who understand AI the most are alarmed. And there's one guy just 2 weeks ago, I wish I could remember his name, that studies this stuff. He came out and said, basically, it's going to kill us all. AI is going to kill us all. Now, of course, I wasn't worried about that because I know it's not going to, but it gives you an idea of how powerful this thing is. There's a monster out there that a lot of us don't understand completely, but look at Elon Musk. People ask him about it. He doesn't laugh. He is aware that there's a problem and that we are not ready for it. And it's coming fast. He says this year that the problems from the AI are going to start being felt and it's going to be rough. And so it's not a good time to be on the fence at all.
Absolutely not. What you were saying about the one currency, I know it's prophesied that we're going to go to a one world government before the end, correct? Yeah. Isn't it also going to be a cashless society? Isn't that part of it?
Yes.
So there you go. That's just one step closer to the cashless society. It's one step closer to, and if there's one currency for all the world, what's the next step? The next logical step, well, not logical to us, but logical to them would be one world government.
Sure.
So,
and like so many things in prophecy, there are two legitimate ways to look at that. There are folks who said it's actually not going to be a one world currency, that even though in some verses it does say that everybody in the world will have to have this in order to buy or sell, but at other places it talks about the Antichrist clearly doing battle with other countries. And so one wonders, okay, how is that going to play out? Obviously the whole world is not under his control if he's at war with different countries. So there is reason to wonder. The Bible in certain places at times does tend to indicate, it refers to the earth as being the Middle East area. For example, when Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel, where it says that Nebuchadnezzar had the entire inhabited earth bow down and worship the statue. Well, Aztecs and people in South America weren't, but the Bible and the scholars of that time tended to refer to the Middle Eastern region as the inhabited earth. So it could very well be that the Antichrist may be a Middle Eastern empire. Some people feel that way, that it will, be the countries in the Middle East, and that, that's where this this currency, this one world, this mark will be implemented. Other people feel like no, it'll be all of Western Europe. We really don't know for certain sure. And like we said earlier, there are legitimate interpretations you can take on that, and I would never be too dogmatic. One guy says he likes to hold a lot of this stuff with an open hand, and I like that expression because there's a lot of things in Bible prophecy that you could point out. Okay, that's a good way to look at this, but this also is a strong way of looking at it, and that's kind of the case with the one world currency. There is going to be a mark of the beast for sure, and it is going to be implemented on a lot of people. And I personally feel like it's going to be most of Western Europe and probably a lot of the Middle East. I don't know if countries like China and Russia, because you can see a separation going between the West and with Russia. So we just don't know. I don't really worry about that. I haven't put a lot of thought into that because I just don't see the church being here during that time period. The Bible says that the Lord will not have Christians here so that they will not put forth their hand to do evil. And there will be some Christians here, lukewarm, who have been left behind. I think there may even be some Christians who are left behind because they want to be. There are Christians, like we've discussed here on this channel, that are infuriated by the idea of the rapture, and they become enraged if you bring it up. I imagine those emotions may be part of the Lord's plan because they're going to be left here to help witness to those who are left behind. And so we know there will be Christians after the rapture left on the earth. And Israel, they talk about the 140,000 in Israel that will be marked and reserved for the Lord. So there will be, but there'll be very few in number at that point in time. There won't be a lot of them.
And going back to what you said about there still being hope, I had just written down here when you had said that there's still hope out there, that we don't want to convey the message that it's all doom and gloom, because there still is hope. As long as Jesus hasn't returned yet, there's still hope. After Jesus returns and the church leaves, like you said, that's when all hope is gone, because then this world is completely unchecked, belongs to the enemy.
Yeah.
Right now, like you said, the Holy Spirit holds it back, God holds it back, the angels hold back that evil for now. Not all of it, but it's kept in check. It's kept in check.
Right.
But I know I keep going back to the rapture dreams and the visions, but we talked about people, more and more people, and that's what I wanted to get at here with the it's not all doom and gloom, is that more and more people are being saved. A lot of these people who are having these rapture dreams and are having these visions are not Christians. They're not saved. And this is what is bringing them to the Lord. It is what's saving them. It's what's causing them to be saved, are these dreams and these visions. So it's the Lord directly contacting them, directly choosing them and telling them, letting them know, waking them up to what's going on. And they're some of the biggest, most vocal people out there are the newest Christians, because they've seen these things. God has given them these visions. They've given them these dreams, and they're the most vocal. And it should really be an inspiration to us all to be as vocal as possible, because like I said, devil's out there actively recruiting. They're making movies about it now. So we need to be out there actively recruiting. We need to be out there being vocal, being as vocal as possible.
Yeah, the time is so short that I've kind of thrown caution to the wind in a lot of respects, and I no longer care if, at this point, I'm trying to get to the finish line, and I don't want to get to that point and have it be said, why didn't you put forth, a maximum effort to try to warn people? And I might be thought of as that guy who thinks that the end of the world is coming. I really don't care at this point. I'll stand by that. I think that world events at this point are making me look a little better than those who refuse to believe. And but I don't look to world events either. I look to the Word, and I know for a fact that the Bible is going to be borne out. And I know, as you do, because I'll admit this flat out. I don't care if people laugh either, because I know 1,000% it's true that the Lord told me it's coming. Oh, well, he's a crazy guy. I think so. The Lord speaks to him. This book right here, this Bible, is absolutely full of the Lord speaking to people. Why is that such an astonishing thing for Christians to think the Lord spoke to somebody. Oh, well, you must have like the tinfoil hat and whatnot. You probably see the Lord speaks to people.
You're
And yeah,
you're you're the crazy homeless guy standing on the corner with the "end is nigh" sign.
exactly. And
That's what
don't,
they want to try to
yeah,
convey you as.
yeah, but don't think for a second that visual is an accident. That gives you a taste of how smart and effective the devil is. He's been pushing that visual since the 70s. The crazy homeless guy with the sign. Because I mean, what could be more brilliant than that? I'm going to make these people look like crackpots and associate them with deranged homeless people so that when the end finally does come, when anybody tries to warn them, people won't listen. I mean, listen, the devil's playing chess and everybody else around here is playing go fish. It's just and we can see it, but other people can't, and it's exasperating because we know how effective he is. And I tell you, he can affect our dreams as well. I had a dream a couple weeks ago. Wasn't a rapture dream at all, but it was a disturbing dream. I thought it was from the Lord, but I only talked to Amy about it, and I kept it to myself, close to my vest. And as the day went on, it really robbed me of my joy. That joy that Christians, I know you know what I'm talking about. The joy that we carry around with us. We get up in the morning. There's a certain level of joy that we have every day because of the Lord. But it robbed me of my joy. I wasn't happy that day, and it was all day long. And the next morning, I was waking up. It was one of these things. I did not hear the Lord like I have on other occasions, but it was very much Him speaking, the same, except it was there's different ways. We've gone through that in detail in here, but this was a thought that came out of nowhere. And again, it was just as I was waking up. And basically it was, anything that robs you of your joy is not from me. And I knew right there that dream had not been from Him. But the way that dream had come, Jeff, it had been preceded the night before by another dream, and it was masterfully set up to where I was initially convinced it had to be from the Lord. But I didn't just rush out and immediately assume it was. I waited to see, because the devil is an expert at couching things and making things look one way when they're entirely different. And that played out, and the Lord basically let it be known, anything that robs you of your joy is not from Him. He's not going to do things or send you things that ruin your day and rob you of your joy. That's one of the amazing things about the Lord is it seems like He's only able to give good news or good things. And it seems like every time He's talked to me or spoken to me, and it hasn't been that many times, but when it has happened, every time it's been like euphoria afterwards. It's been great. He's never spoken to me and I was like, oh gee, wow, that was terrible. Just the opposite. It's like it's the best thing. And this one wasn't that. I would not list this as having heard from the Lord the same way as other times when I've documented on here. This was a if it was like a UFO sighting, it would be of the third kind, I guess. I don't know. It wasn't very intense, but it was clear enough that I knew it was from Him. And that little period when you're just waking up and you're not quite asleep and you're not quite awake, and He speaks that at that time a lot. And so it's the spiritual warfare right now. And you've mentioned this, Jeff. The spiritual warfare right now is off the charts. I mean, if Christians aren't feeling it, then there must not be a threat to the devil, because he is launching attacks right now on Christians. I've heard a ton of Christians talking about the spiritual warfare being nonstop right now. And I know you felt that this year. I've certainly felt it this year. There is no doubt that the devil is upped his game, and I don't blame everything. Every single thing is not the devil. If I get stuck in traffic or whatnot, this is clearly the work of Satan and whatnot. I mean, no, I don't do that. That things happen, but the Bible does tell us that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against powers and forces and dark forces in heavenly places. So we do know that the enemy is launching attacks against us. And I think 2023 has been quite a year for that.
And, not to say that we're special or anything. We constantly say that we're not, but why wouldn't he try? Like you said, he's done a number on both of us in 2023,
Right.
and it's right after we got in a good flow on this channel. We were releasing videos last year. We started the channel last year, and we were releasing videos, and now it's almost like he's trying to slow us down
Right.
because we get on here and we talk about these things, and we try to wake people up, and we try to make them see what's happening. We try to make them see that he is going to, try to pull the wool over their eyes. And I don't think it's a coincidence that so many things, one right after another, has been happening to you and I. And I'm sure it's not just us. I'm sure it's other people too.
Sure. Yeah.
And going back to what you said about him affecting our dreams, I fully 100% believe you and believe that, because I had a presence that was tormenting me. Well, I've talked about it on the channel before, how I had the same exact dream a handful of times or more. And then I'd wake up and I'd just feel evil, an evil presence in my dark bedroom. And it's, God can affect our dreams, like you said. Like, I'll once again mention it again: rapture, dreams, and visions.
Sure.
And the devil is supernatural as well. So why would it be out of the realm of possibilities that he can affect? He can affect our moods. He can
Right.
affect our health. Why wouldn't he be able to affect our dreams as well? He's always, that little voice in the back of your head that's gnawing at you over something that you did. Like we've talked about before, sin, we give it to God, we repent, we ask for forgiveness, he forgives us, and yet there's that little voice in the back of your head that's just wants you to remember that sin. That's
Sure.
that's the devil.
Yep.
So why wouldn't he be able to affect our dreams? And it's all just him trying to keep us down, because he doesn't want the gospel to get out. He doesn't want people to be saved. His goal is the exact opposite. Is to get as many people as he can into hell. Whereas, God, Jesus, the gospel, our job as Christians is to get as many people as we can into heaven.
Right.
So,
Yeah. It's and every time we do a video like this, it gets harder and harder for it to be said that we haven't tried to warn people. We may not have been as effective as others, but we certainly have tried. Trying to, as unpopular a message as it is. And I know people, probably get exasperated as to, why do you want to talk about this? Let's, just ignore it and whatnot. But that's not really an effective policy. How to handle life is to ignore problems and maybe they'll go away. Once or twice that's worked for me, but for the most part, that's not a very good way to live life, especially when the world is facing problems like it is right now. And like we said before, I don't want to forget, you know, I may have mentioned I gave up on the political thing in 2020. I saw the handwriting on the wall. I was like, this is, I won't use the expression that crossed my mind, but this is a show that I don't want to watch anymore. This isn't going anywhere. I see what this is. I do understand. I think it's great that people are still trying to fight the fight. I'm not saying that's wrong. It's probably a good thing. But for me, that's over. We're past that. The problems of this world are not going to be fixed by politicians, if they ever could have been. And so I really don't pay a lot of attention to a lot of it. I pay attention to what's going on in Israel. I'm aware of some of the journal stuff that occurred. I was told about the thing with Tucker Carlson leaving Fox last night. I didn't really watch Tucker's show. I have seen some of his YouTube episodes and whatnot that I thought were really well done. But the takeaway for me is very clear. Here you had somebody who was openly and brazenly speaking against the system and the deep state, and speaking against the elites that dominate and control the media and the country. And I was amazed that it was allowed to go on as long as it was. I was like, this is not going to be tolerated much longer, because they just are not. They're not going to tolerate it. Period. This guy is way too effective. You have millions of people tuning in every night to watch this. This isn't going to last. So last night, when all of a sudden it just whoop, in one day it came to an end. No real explanation. I mean, of course, there's people coming up with all sorts of crackpot things. They don't like. NPR is claiming, sexual harassment and whatnot. All that stuff. That's nonsense. The people, oh, he's mean to his staff. Every report we've ever had, the man's been caught on video from anonymous people he didn't even know in the park while fishing, talking with people and about fishing and whatnot. I mean, just the nicest guy, but he had the character. Remember, the devil is the great accuser. And so there's a segment of our society that immediately defaults to accusations. Let's accuse everybody. Let's say that they're this, or let's say that they're that, or slander them this way. So I just, that's all white noise. But the fact that the biggest voice now for reason and sanity is gone. Now, he's not dead, but he's not going to have a platform. I don't care where he goes now. He's not going to have the platform he had before. And so the world just got have a little less truth in it than it did before. He was one of the real only rays of sanity before, and now that's been snuffed out. It's just every single voice that is, championing common sense and doing things in a reasonable manner is being snuffed out, and they're seeing to it. And people can say, oh, well, it's just coincidence, or not. I don't see it that way. It's fine. You don't have to. That's the beauty of the country as it is now, at least, is that you're free to see things differently. But for me, I don't see it as a coincidence at all. They had to get rid of that voice. All sorts of bad actors wanted him gone. He's gone. And I don't see it surprising at all. I see it's just one more step.
Like you said, it's not a coincidence. He had the number one show in that time slot every single night. And millions and millions and millions of people were tuning in to make him number one. And they tuned in for a reason.
Sure.
But, of course, they had to get rid of him because anybody who speaks out against the establishment has to be silenced.
Yeah. He was hammering their lies. I mean, their narrative was just, he was taking it apart every single night. They just weren't going to let that go.
No. No, I'm sure they've been waiting for this opportunity for years, but
sure.
Yeah. Well, if we're well over an hour now, was there anything else that you wanted to add? Nope. Or
not at this point? Nope.
Depending on what happens, today, tomorrow, the next, we'll probably be back with this topic at some point. I'm pretty sure we will be back at some point with this topic, but just like all topics, we leave it all open-ended, and we'll never say this is the final part of this series because we like to leave them all open just in case we do decide to come back to them. But if there wasn't anything else you had, I'll go ahead and close us out.
That's it.
Just like in every episode, we don't do this for the views or the likes or to get as many subscribers as possible. We just try to convey the message that we feel like the Lord has bestowed upon us to convey. And one of those messages, especially with this topic, is that sense of urgency. Time is growing short, and we've said it many times in this episode. It's time to be vocal. It's time to go out and introduce as many people to the gospel as possible, because the devil's out there scooping up all the lost and all the fallen and all those who are uninformed, who don't know. And if that's not apparent to you now, then you need to do a little investigating, because he's out there actively recruiting, and that's basically what that's in less or in more unflattering terms. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be recruiting. We need to be introducing people to Jesus and to the light and to the gospel and to God, and we need to show them that that God-sized hole in their heart that I mentioned before can't be filled with anything on this earth. And once it is filled with God, there's just it's indescribable. Like you said, you wake up every day with that joy, with that joy that is from Him. But new stuff's happening every day, and time is growing short, and now's the time. Now is the time. Thanks for tuning in. If we do get 1 million subscribers, that means we're getting the message out there, and that's what we want to do. But we're not trying to monetize this channel. We're not trying to make money off of it. We're not trying to become internet famous. We just want to spread the gospel. Basically, we're out there, like Jerry said before. We can't say that we didn't try. So that's basically all we want to do with this channel, is just to try and just to get the word out there. But thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next time. Come on back and watch the next episode. And thanks for watching. God bless.